Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and hands-on learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. My name is Sylvan and I will be your host. Together with Startup Ticker, Switzerland's largest news portal for startups, Swisspreneur presents the Startup of the Week. For 10 consecutive weeks, we will portray a Swiss startup that is currently doing fundraising. Especially in times of COVID-19, we want to actively support startups and strengthen the ecosystem. Today's guest is Michael Besmer, CEO and co-founder of onCyt. The Swiss startup developed a high-resolution microbial monitoring and laboratory automation device. This means less effort, more data, and deeper insights. We talk about Michael's background, how they bootstrapped the company so far, and what their plans look like for the future. Let's talk to Michael. Michael, a very warm welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, to the Startup of the Week edition. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So today we're going to talk about your startup, onCyt. And I'm very curious to know more about what actually motivated you to start your own company.
So onCyt goes back to my PhD work at ETH and EWAG in Switzerland. So it's the Water Research Institute of ETH. And I did my PhD there, and I got in touch with the basic technology that is part of what we do now. And I had the pleasure of doing a very applied project there in the canton of Basel-Land in the north of Switzerland. And essentially we came up with the core technology that we are marketing now. Back then, and it was a pure research project, and essentially we did that for ourselves to solve our own problems or the ones posed to us. And already during the PhD, because we worked so applied, and it became clear that other people wanted to use this technology. And I think that's a great start. And frankly, I didn't really know what else to do, and I enjoy. I mean, my PhD was a lot of fun, and actually, the transition didn't even feel very strong because I was keep doing my own thing, and I really enjoyed what I was doing. And this was, ironically, probably the easiest way, even though it was not easy, always to keep doing what I enjoyed doing for many years already. And so I think that's a great motivation.
Absolutely. I also think that starting with your own problem and solving that is probably one of the best motivations that you can have for starting a company.
Yes.
So what's the exact problem that you solve with your startup and also for your customers? So basically, why do customers buy from you? What problem do you solve for them?
So it's a bit technical to understand. I'll try to keep this as simple as possible. So essentially, if people produce something, shall we say that involves something in liquid form, water in whatever form, then they need to keep an eye on the quality of their product, and they need to keep an eye on whether their production process and their production facilities are operating in a proper way to make sure they produce things in a consistently high and quality, and so all these production facilities are full of sensors for pH or conductivity or temperature or all these things, which what we call chemical and physical quality parameters of what they do, and that makes a lot of sense. And they monitor this 24/7 permanently, so that they have permanent information. And if something goes wrong, they see it immediately, and they can take action to make sure that things don't become problematic or in the worst case stop the production, and then they wouldn't send out the products to the customers. And so they've been doing this for a long time, and this makes a lot of logic sense. This is all about risk management and process analytics to hedge against risks, and also to make their production processes very efficient. And for microbiology, so for bacteria and microalgae and yeast, which are very, very important. So they can be dangerous, but they're also very important to help producing things. So think of food and beverages, but also in biotechnology, that's actually where microorganisms do the job for us. it's very hard to measure them, and there's very old, very slow methods are being used, which are all in the laboratory and take a lot of work, and is very far away from real-time information. And that's essentially what we start to provide. So it's not a sensor in terms of technology, but the data that people can get out looks exactly like the data they get from their other sensors, but it's now for microorganisms. And that's the big step that we are enabling our customers to do, to kind of complete, in a sense, their surveillance of their processes. And we believe this is extremely important because microorganisms are extremely important in those processes.
Absolutely. That's a very fascinating area. And I think behind every fascinating startup idea is also a fascinating team. Can you maybe tell us a bit more about your team and, the background and experience that you bring to the table?
Yes. So I have to say we are not quite the classic startup team from technical universities. So, 2 or 3 guys doing PhD next to each other, and then have a colleague from St. Gallen, HSG. And I mean, that's a good setup, right? And so that was just not the case because we were a small group. So there was nobody who was doing PhD next to me on that topic. So I had to compile my founding team a bit differently. And so the inventor, who is an engineer, so I'm not an engineer by training, I'm more the analytics person, it was part of the founding team. He then got a colleague in who founded was part of his own ETH spin-off, and also has an EMBA from IMD in Lausanne. So he's an engineer by training, has been in his startup for 10 years, and also has a very strong business development and sales and marketing background. And helped. And then I got another friend who is quite a bit older than myself, who is really good with finances and all of these things. So this was a bit the founding team, and everybody was hands-on, but not 100% in terms of workload, because they had jobs of their own. But it was a good start, and in terms of diversity of backgrounds, so I came from the user side. We had a tech guy who also helped us outsourcing what we call executing engineering early on in trustworthy hands. So we also, kind of had a lean organization with very careful outsourcing from the beginning. The finances, and then obviously the business development where I had a lot to learn. So I had the user view, but the tools and the strategies of how to kind of approach customers and things like this, and try to understand customer value really, and also take a bit of a sciencey approach on that, not only on the tech but on that. That was extremely helpful. And then we relatively early on started to hire people to strengthen the team, in addition to the outsourcing, and so we first hired people with a kind of a technical background, and then that person didn't work out. I think that was more a personal thing. And then we said, oh no, now we need sales guys, and that also didn't work out. And so now we have sorted it out. So we really now have a strong team. So I have 2 female colleagues who work with me as well, who have a science background, a microbiology background, but are eager and open to embrace our business development and sales marketing framework, which is not super elaborate but very straightforward. And that's how we essentially balance these things. But the advantage really is that we are not techies in that sense. I think this is, as great as these people are, I think this can be a bit challenging sometimes, because you lose the customer value perspective sometimes, because you enjoy your machine so much, which we also do. But so this has proven to work out really well. And then around that, we obviously have great people who consult us with a lot of experience.
Perfect. I think with such a great team, I'm sure that you also achieved certain milestones recently. Can you tell us a bit more about the recent milestones that you passed with onCyt?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not going to go over all of them, but so we've been around for 3 years. And the nice thing was that we essentially started with a product already. I mean, it's a bit rough, but it was not, tape and cardboard. It was a real thing. and so we started selling very early on. And so, I mean, our first sale was after, I think, 6 months or so, obviously with a bit of preparation even before we were founded. So I would maybe summarize that until now we have had about 20 or more successful projects with paying customers. That's a mixture between sales and sales support and consultancy a little bit, and then kind of contracts where we do measurement campaigns for a period of time and just analyze the data and write up a report. And so and that has also generated about 800,000 Swiss francs of revenue, which, I mean, is not the world, but for a small startup, I think this is really nice. And so essentially what I would maybe say is that we have we have innovated internally once more. So after we started with a pretty good product already, we essentially already took the feedback from the users and innovated our product once. And that came out end of 2019, and we successfully established that now, the next generation in the market. So I think that's another key milestone, and so I think it's probably the most important ones.
Absolutely. Cool. And what's also always interesting is to think, or to also have a look at the competitive landscape. Is there anyone out there who you see as a competitor or as a replacement of your product that you have to compete with, or that you have also to, to sort of win over them in order to sell your product?
So I'll answer to the first afterwards. There is a bit of competition. So we're not quite replacing stuff that exists. And in that sense, this is also what makes it interesting, but also a bit difficult, both towards customers and towards investors, because we cannot just say, well, we do that and we do it a bit faster and it costs, 10% of what it used to cost. So these are very classic, value pitches, and that's not the case. So we essentially generate much more information for customers and more valuable information, and it's a bit of a paradigm shift, which is exciting, but it takes a bit more explaining, and once people get it, then that can work well. And in terms of competition, so there is some indirect competition. So the big theme of microbial, what I call microbial monitoring, so this idea of keeping an eye on microorganisms always in real time. So this is a big thing. So it's still early-ish stage, but I mean, that is a very clear trend. And there is a number of also big players that try to come up with solutions, and some have already disappeared again because they didn't work. But so there, I think the bigger field is open. But this competition, I feel, is so indirect that it's, I actually enjoy that, because that means there is a market really. And then with a bit more direct competition, where shall we say that the technology is rather similar-ish, although solved in a different way, that exists. I would essentially say one company exists that does something rather similar. They're very focused on drinking water, which is also where we originate from. And so in the beginning we thought, this is a rather direct and, I mean, difficult competition, so to speak. By now, I think not. I mean, not even to be negative about them. I think they have a very focused product, which also limits it a little bit, which is great. But I think there is enough space. And again, at the same time, I enjoy not being the only one, because otherwise I should maybe see a doctor, because I have visions visions of the bad kind, so to speak.
Exactly. So there's sort of a confirmation that, there is something coming up, there is a trend, and you are probably active in the right market, but you also clearly differentiate yourself from targeting different niches than other companies out there.
Yes, I strongly believe so. And in terms of core technology, I think us and this other company, we probably made the right pick for, amongst, shall we say, 2 or 3 possible ways of finding microorganisms. So in that sense, we there we both have an advantage towards others. So what I would call more indirect competition. And then between us, I think there's enough space, really. And we do differentiate. I mean,
perfect. That makes sense. Sometimes not necessarily linked to competition, but in general, we also like to talk about challenges. If you think back the 3 years of onCyt, what was like one of the biggest challenges that you had to face and how did you overcome it?
So there is maybe two. I will say Corona is not easy, but I will not talk about that. Also, I think as a startup, ironically, I felt more prepared than others because we have to improvise and be flexible always.
That's a constant mindset, yes.
Yeah, it really is. It really is, and lean organization, and and having been set up not too long ago, and having working in the cloud from day one and stuff like that. So I think the biggest challenge really has been people. Also the biggest pleasure. So I want to be clear about this. But finding the right people, be it for the team, being for in the beginning when we founded, and then if there is changes in people's life and they want to phase out, not because they dislike the company, but they can't, they don't have enough time or so, and then replacing them, and finding this mixture also as a founder and as the head of a company to go your own way and still have sparring partners and take into account their advice. And then you see it also with customers. I mean, we have a good pitch, we have a good product, I'm sure, but it really depends who you're going to meet on the other end. And so I think finding the right people and getting in touch with the right people is really what makes the difference. If you have a decently good product and a decently good organization, maybe a bit more specifically how to overcome it, I'll focus maybe on the team. So I have two souls in myself. So I have a very good intuition, I believe, with people, and I have a very strong analytical mindset. And I try to kind of think things through and make logic sense of that, and that's still good. I mean, I think this is a brilliant mixture actually, but I learned in this context that intuition really is more important. Obviously, one has to check people through on a practical level as well. But I really have learned to trust my intuition more again. And if I get irritated, I mean, even on a very small level, when interviewing with people, then it's probably not right. And that doesn't mean there can never be an irritation. But I think. So my last 2 hires were good, and my first 3 hires were, shall we say, mixture, although with a positive tendency at least. And I think my last 2 hires were good. So one has been with us for 1.5 years, and that was brilliant. And the other one remains to be seen, but I have a very good feeling, and that was because I didn't trust my intuition enough in the beginning. Because it was new and it was uncertain. And now I feel more comfortable about that.
Did you do anything in particular, to change that or to also reflect on your intuition that helped you to make these better decisions? Because I think that's a very interesting topic.
Yeah. So I was just listening more carefully to myself, during interviews, after interviews. And we did also, I think, change the interview question style a little bit to really feel the person more and worry a bit less about technical questions, so to speak. And definitely also, have 2 rounds of interview, and if needed 3. I mean, the third can be via phone if needed. And just not jumping to decisions too easily. And so what I started to do also with some people is to in the second round say, let's reserve a bit more time and let's go to the laboratory, and kind of casually do a small job with them, which is not really about testing whether they can hold the tool or something like this. But it's, and also not to stress them out. I mean, that's not my point. To see how they work under pressure, that's also important. But because then you speak and you do something and you speak and you catch them a bit in a different mode of operation, and I think this gave me really good feeling, and always something goes wrong anyway, and then you still see how they react and they catch them a bit off guard. So that I felt was I mean, it's not particularly original, but it helped me a lot to feel people better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can only underline what you just said. I think this is such an important part, to listen to your intuition.
Yeah.
Currently, you're also fundraising. Can you tell us a bit more about how much money you're actually looking for and what the milestones that you want to achieve with that money are?
So we're looking for 1 million Swiss francs. I mean, we have a bit of a bandwidth there, but that's the target. We essentially want to do two things. So we have 2.5, shall we say? So we have one more product generation, which we are developing, and we've already started this, but we need a bit of money. I'd say maybe 30% or so. We're also applying for non-dilutive funding to back that, but in case we don't get that, we need a bit of the fundraising money for that. Not going to go into detail, but essentially that really is maybe not the final, but the answer to all the feedback that we've had, which should really take away the key limitations which we feel are hindering us from entering more an exponential growth phase. So really scaling is the goal, not a scaling financing round yet. It's our Series A, so we are only founder based. Only the founders have contributed capital until now. So it's our Series A, but the goal is to create a product that allows scaling, and it's not starting from scratch. It's really having the next generation, and we think that's pretty much it. And then we will keep innovating that a little bit. And then the other thing is, to enable the scaling, we need to broaden the team, especially on the sales and marketing side. We will also work with strategic distribution partners to scale up. So we're not going to blow up our organization, but also these can only be effective if you have good people supporting them, and that's essentially what we need the money for, to scale up the team so that we're ready to scale up the sales. And the organization on a bit of practical levels, of course, but that's a minor share. Yeah.
By the way, also congratulations on bootstrapping so far. I think these are always the most admiring entrepreneurs that are able to actually create a company and bootstrap up to a certain level and don't need any external funding. So congratulations for that.
Thanks.
Before we wrap up this session, I have some rapid fire questions for you. Just 3 short ones where we are curious to learn more about you. What was your first job or your summer job in general as a teenager?
So I didn't have a summer job. I was giving some extra lessons to younger students, essentially. And during summer holiday, I took all these courses where you could see, how they burn trash or recycle stuff, and foster my curiosity, which helped me become a good researcher.
Nice, cool. And what are you most proud of in your life?
Yeah, so that's easy. So that's my 2 children, 2 girls, 6, 7, and 9, and they're awesome, and they are also very curious, and I'm proud about that. That said, I am also proud of onCyt, and that's my other kid, but I'm more proud of my kids. But the thing which you mentioned last, so building onCyt for 3 years, and essentially self-financed until now, this is not a small achievement, so I'm pretty proud of that as well. Yeah.
And what's also a surprising fact that people don't know about you?
So I don't have too many secrets. So maybe this is an ironic story. So I've been dealing with water my whole professional career, and I'm pretty crazy about water, in pretty much every form, but I can't swim. So it's a long story why, and
Oh,
a pretty
nice.
good reason why I can't. But so I'm actually a bit afraid of water because I would drown in it. So I love water so much, but I don't like to be in water too much.
That's a very interesting relationship to have.
It is a bit. It is, yes.
Awesome.
Right.
Thank you so much for your time, Michael. It was a pleasure talking to you, and we wish you all the best and lots of success with the ongoing fundraising, but also with onCyt for the future and for a hopefully successful scale up.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here, and I hope it was interesting for the audience.
Today's episode was brought to you by SBB Startup. If you think that your startup or your idea is a good fit to the Swiss Railways, get in touch with them at sbbstartup.com. It doesn't matter if you're an already established company or just have an idea, the dedicated team behind SBB Startup is here to help you and to evaluate the good fit to the Swiss Railways. In order to contact them, visit sbbstartup.com. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the content, we would be thrilled to receive your rating on Apple Podcasts. That way you not only support Swisspreneur, but also help other entrepreneurs discovering the show and finding more valuable information on how to run their businesses. Next week, we will already be back with an all-new episode of the Swisspreneur Show, so we hope to see you again then for a new episode.